Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Welcome, Ginni Rometty.
Thank you.
Welcome, Ginni Rometty. So glad to have you here, Ginni.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I love the energy.
Why? Why are you excited to be here?
I'm so happy to see so much energy, people walking around, people in class. Maybe you don't want to be in class, but I saw you in class before, so it's great.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here. I think there's so much ground that we're going to cover today. The place I wanted to start is, what did you want to be when you were growing up? Did you have a vision of a career? Did you know you were going to be the CEO of IBM?
Oh, come on. No. Nope. I am sad to tell you I had no vision. I had only hoped at one point that I could be independent, make enough money to support myself, and maybe I thought about being a doctor until I could not pass human reproduction. And then that's unfortunately a true story. I'm like, all these colored pencils, like, where is this going? And after that I said, no, not medicine. But actually, nope, I just thought, I want to be independent. I hope to do okay. I hope if I do a job okay, I'll get another job. And that was where it started.
When did you start to realize that you might be able to run one of the biggest tech companies on earth?
You know, wow, okay. When did you think you'd be a best-selling author?
The day it happened.
Okay, yeah, exactly the answer. That is exactly, honestly, how I felt. I know a lot of people, and you've probably interviewed lots of people, Adam, that say, oh no, I wanted to be this from the very beginning. And I even deal with lots of people that worked for me. They're like, no, don't want to be this. And I always tell them, please don't say what you don't want to be yet. And just let life unfold. Because I never felt that way either. And I probably even didn't realize I could do it till I was well into my 40s. And that I thought, oh, maybe I could scale to do something. After I'd done some super hard stuff, then I thought, okay, maybe I could do this. But never, ever where it started. And I don't know if I'm a part of a generation that was that way, that was just like, look, I just want to, if I do a good job, it's my ticket to do another thing. So I don't have a very exciting answer to that, because it was nothing I ever, like, yes, CEO or bust. Mm-mm.
Well, I think in some ways that's a relief to some of the folks in the audience with us today.
How many want to be CEO, know already, of something? Oh, that's interesting.
Who's willing to admit it is the hands you got. They're at least twice as many.
Okay, shut your eyes so just Adam and I can see you.
Everyone close your eyes.
Oh, they're already closed.
Okay, show us again. Aspiring CEOs, that's maybe triple.
Yeah.
Okay, put your hands down, now you can open.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, it's like maybe a third, right, that had their hands up. So I think that's kind of good, because let life unfold.
But on that note, I was actually just hearing from an undergrad this afternoon that all of her friends feel like they're already behind. And I'm like, wait, you're at Penn. You're ahead of the vast majority of everyone in human history. Can you elaborate, please, Ginni?
Yeah, I am. This is one of my greatest worries. Actually, my husband and I were both talking about, someone said, what advice would you give a graduating class or something? And so I decided to ask him that question. What would he give? Now, he's like a type Z, I'm A. And so I'm like, what would the Z say? And I said, dear, what would you say? And he goes, I would tell them to just let life unfold. They're too impatient. And he said, and honestly, I do worry. I worry about all of you in the sense of, God, I'm like, I could never get into your school now. I could never get into Northwestern probably now either, to be honest. And the pressure and the intensity in the competition that is so high. So I worry about a generation that feels like, oh my God, I'm already losing before I've even started, right? And maybe you don't want anybody to worry about you, but that is a little bit how I feel. And I feel like that idea of, look, if you just keep learning, like my advice to that question would have been, ask more questions than you have answers. That's like my advice when you leave. And if you do, I guarantee you'll go somewhere you want to go at the end.
I think that's a wonderful mantra. It does raise a question, though, for me, taking the perspective of those who feel behind, which is, like, when you say just let things unfold, like, for how long, and how do I know if I'm doing a good job?
Yeah, okay. That's a fair question, all right? Because I think we all use a barometer of what's around us. I mean, I have to say, okay, I'm lying to say I just sat there and said, oh, look at all these people getting promoted. You know, isn't that nice? Not me. That would not have been the answer to that. So this, my kind of philosophy, though, had been, and it stems back to where I started from, like where I grew up, which Adam knows because he read the book, looked at the book. read the book, sat on it. I don't know, one or all of the three, maybe. But because my father abandoned our family when I was young, and so I was 16. My brothers and sisters were younger, and I happened to walk into the garage and I heard the conversation. Just a coincidence. I heard him tell my mother he could care less what happened to her or any of us, and she could work out on the street for all he cared. And in that moment, it'll answer back to your question about now what do you think about a career and how do you measure yourself? My mom didn't cry, but she was 34 years old. She had 4 kids. She had not a day of education past high school, never worked a day outside the home. We immediately were on financial aid, food stamps, going to lose our house. And she was just really determined that's not how this story could end. And I would take care of the family. She would go back, get a little bit of education, get a job, a little more, a little better job. Never did get a degree. But that when you say, okay, but how do you judge where you're going? For me in my life, that set the bar for bad, that nothing could ever be that bad again. So anything from here now looks really good to me. And that feeling is really freeing and liberating, because I would go on in life to do really hard things and in the moment think, oh my God, if this doesn't work, I would always remember it's never as bad as that was. And so I would then learn to judge. Part of my shield would be, we could never cause my mom trouble. So we had to study. It's like, we can't cause her problems. Do your homework, because she's got enough. And my sisters and brothers are all very successful as well. My mom will go, what did I ever do? And we just observed, right, that to us, and my great-grandma and grandma, who all had tragedies, we learned hard work took you to a better place. That was I know that maybe sounds like so simple, that there was always a way forward, and hard work would make that happen. And so as life would go on, and you go to school and work and everything else, I think buried deep down was that thought that, look, hard work usually leads to another better place. However, I would say that's completely naive if that's the only thing you think about, right? So you write a lot. And I would say, I can remember as time would go on, I would start to say, well, no, wait a second. If I was just as good as that person, why did this not happen or that? And I learned to start then be an advocate for myself. Like, what was I worth on the outside? I would, before my boss ever did, your increase, I'm like, oh, just in case you're wondering what people like this make out here, here's your input, and in a nice way, that kind of thing. I think that's the one part I would say to people when you say, where I say, well, you do have to be your own advocate. In my way, is in a good way, though.
Well, that goes to the topic of your book, which is power.
Yeah.
Your view of power is not necessarily one that's been dominant in corporate America for generations. And maybe to tee this up, I want to read you just an excerpt from an email that I got yesterday. This is from one of the most senior executives in all of tech, who's had a lot of impact on the world. And I suspect you know this person, but I won't identify. Quote,
if you said he or she, that would narrow it down,
Not giving you any clues, Ginni, not one. Here it is, ready? Quote, the average employee in corporate America just wants to get paid for shirking. Most employees in corporate America need bosses who are monitoring their performance, watching them, seeing them, and grading them to ensure they work hard. What would you say to that executive?
I would say, I hope I never have to work for them, is what I would say, because I do not believe that is what the normal person out there in anybody's team looks like. Not in 100 years do I believe that. I don't believe it was the past, and I don't believe it is this moment. I do believe, you guys will be the judge, Paul Pullman, did you ever interview him on any of his books?
Sure.
And after he left Unilever, he wrote this book, or Net Positive. He's very much into the environment. I have my set of movements I'm after. His is just a little different. And he published a survey interviewed maybe 5,000 to 10,000 people about what does another generation look for in their leadership. And the order, I get this directionally correct, was authenticity. It was a sense of fairness. It was about doing something that had, purpose. You may only get to do that 20% of your time, but at least you're contributing to something that goes down in that direction. And so that to me was what people were looking for. Like, that is not what motivates people. And it's a big point. I did not intend to write a book. I was telling Adam this. This was like the last thing on my mind and I know you probably think, oh yeah, sure. Like, most people go, oh, CEO books are vanity projects, right? I had to go look up what that meant. And I was like, oh man, if that would be the reaction to my book, honest to God, it would break my heart. And so when I was stepping down, I'll come back to the what's power, like what do you want? Do you want to be that? People say, hey, you should write about your journey, where you came from. You would lead IBM, be the 9th leader of IBM in the most tumultuous time it would ever experience in its history. And you would also then, now I do a lot of work on something called Skills First. I hope we get to talk about.
Oh, we will.
And I co-chair an organization called 110 with an alum not too far from here, Ken Frazier, who ran Merck, to place 1 million black employees into family-sustaining jobs without college degrees. And we're year 3 into that. So, okay, they said you should write a book. I was like, oh. And I was telling Adam briefly outside, I started wanting to write all about this movement, about skills first and why it's important to democracy and all my data to prove this and my experience at IBM, why you have to promote people for their skills. We're going to talk. And I started on that path. They were like, oh, that's so boring. This is nothing personal. You have to be vulnerable. And this was super duper hard for me to do. And it backed into this title of Good Power. So it ended up becoming a memoir with a purpose. So I do not say everything of my life, nor do I say everything of IBM's life but I was there 40 years, so it's like a little hard to ignore it. But to Adam's question, I feel in the moment, and it's what I observed and learned from people about leadership, it's all revisionist history, was that in this moment in time particularly, I think, I'm going to ask you then your definition. My view of leadership is that people want someone who is going to, as I say, embrace tension of different opinions. Like, don't run from it and don't push people to two corners. Like, embrace those differences. That's like my first part of the definition. The second part is be respectful of it. Like, that's not respectful, no offense. Be respectful in leadership. Do not govern by fear. I've lived through many times when it was fear. It's not sustainable. And this idea, if you would celebrate progress, there's so many big problems that we have to solve. If you would just focus on taking a step forward instead of solving the whole thing, like, you'd be surprised when you turn back how far you'll get. Otherwise, you polarize. It's like all here or all here. So in this moment, I ended up back into this thought of those premises, and particularly tension. Like, yes, conflict. Go for conflict. Like, just get it somewhere more. Just take another step with the person somewhere. If you would just listen. And I back into then talking about we all have that power, and it ends up being the power of me, we, and us. That because I kind of learned in my life, I'm like, my mom had power when she had nothing else. She had power. I mean, to me, like I hope I can inspire people to believe that they had some power. You have something when you have nothing else. And then you start to impact people, and then eventually you might be able to impact society. So to your point, I don't think that's you. Do you guys want to work for the person who wrote that email? Hands up. The ones who wanted to be CEO do, or
Three of them want to be that executive.
No, I mean, seriously, what do you think of that answer? Do you believe that?
No, of course not.
But like what? What do you think of it?
Well, I'll tell you what I wrote back to the executive last night, which was there's zero evidence that what you say is true, but there are a lot of managers who operate that way, and projection bias is alive and well.
Okay. That's a very good answer. You should be an author, or a professor. No, right? No, seriously, that is a good answer because, like, I think the most valuable things I learned from good people I work from was to make decisions based on values and treat people that way, right? Like, I hope one day you either create a company or you are lucky enough to work in one that is really steeped in values. Because I think some of the issues we see today are companies that their values aren't too deep, and just like when the wind blows on a tree without deep roots, they sway with the wind. And I can remember one of my very first bosses, I was the first time now managing people, and he says to me, I came in and I said, hey, I have a guy that's telling really bad jokes, misogynistic jokes, and people are starting to complain, and he's a top performer. And he said to me, well, this is unequivocal. He said, you tell him to stop or you fire him right now. He's like, I don't even understand this conversation. And it's such a simple example, but it taught me in a moment, it go back 40 years now, taught me in a moment that, leadership by values and creating followership that way, says a whole lot more than what you just described, managed by process.
It certainly does. I think where, for me, it gets really challenging is that sounds to me like a broken definition of performance to begin with.
Yeah,
right?
Agreed.
If you're,
no outcome, right?
Yeah, if you're causing people that kind of discomfort, then you shouldn't be considered a high performer in the first place.
Yeah, I agree with you. I couldn't agree more. Oh, that's so sad. Is there any other notes on there that somebody wrote you that are better? Let's get this uplifting now.
I didn't bring in any of the exciting ones. I just wanted you to smack that one down.
Okay, all right.
But why do you think these notions of power are still pervasive?
Yeah, so the other part of writing it was, I don't know, you don't have to look very far to find negative, I think. How many of you think there's like a lot of negative examples of power out there? Yeah, okay, well, a lot more than, okay. And this was what was starting to bother me, that I would talk to a lot of people and I'd say, would you like to be powerful? And the answer would be, no, I would rather work on really important things. This is why I ended up with the book. The irony is you need power to work on really important things. That was, to me, like the crux of why I finally did it. Because I'm like, but I really want people to believe I wasn't comfortable leading those other ways. And I learned these other ways from lots of people that I became a mosaic of, right? And I was like, yeah, and you know what? I really feel like we're changing society too now, working in that way, and it's such a divided world. So to me, in this moment in time, it was why I thought maybe I could persuade a few more people that it's okay to lead this way.
So what are your basic principles of good power?
Okay. So thank you for asking, because most time everybody wants to talk about all the personal stories, which I ended up, that was really super hard for me to write vulnerable stories, okay, because I spent a whole life trying not to be. And then I had to now sit back, and people say the only way they're going to learn from you is if you tell them about like how you feel and what you thought behind all of this. Not just, you can't just tell them stuff. You have to be able to show stuff. So I backed into in the middle part of the book. So I have a lot of tips in the first part about, I felt like the habits I got taught that made me feel like I had some power. The middle part of the book, though, is about once you start caring about other people. And it just kind of happens. I mean, you get some roles, all of a sudden, it's not about you anymore. And so there are 5 principles in the middle. And again, they are revisionist history, okay? People go like, oh, did you lead with those? I'm like, no, I didn't even know them. But it's like, now when I look back in time, I hope I can share that. And the first one is, if you really want to do something hard in a good way, which is what the book's about, the first one is, can you be in service of something? Can you decide what you are in service of? And most people are like, yeah, service, I provide service. I'm like, no. I said, what are you in service of? Like, you had Danny Meyer, who's a good friend. So I think he's a great example of being in service of. And if you've ever gone to any of his restaurants, and if you go in and just have like good food, would you think that's a good night?
Obviously.
Of course not, right? I mean, you're like, no. But if the wait person is like really cares that you have a good time, okay, you would say they're in service of you more than just delivering your food. And the wait person, if they know you have a good evening, they're kind of taking it on faith. You'll give them a better tip. Now, he has his whole tipping philosophy, so put that aside, but with Danny. But this idea, what are you in service of, is a super important point. Because I learned really early on that if you can trust that, and it is trust because these don't happen synchronously. If I trust that, like, I need to try to, I want Adam's broadcast to be successful because I want him to be able to feel like he taught people something, right? I don't need to tell you everything in the book. I need that to happen. And I trust that over time that comes back to me in a good way in some way, right? And so it does involve trust. That's the first principle, be in service of something. It's kind of like the fundamental reason why you would work somewhere. And a lot of places aren't clear about that. The second thing is, if you want to do something hard, then you got to realize you got to build belief constantly. And that is a job of head and heart. Like, I got to convince you to go somewhere you don't necessarily want to go voluntarily. So that head to heart thing, I had to learn about how to appeal to people's heads and their hearts at the same time. And it can mean you have to be brutally honest, bad stuff. But you also, I'm talking to your heart, and I understand at the same time what I'm doing. And second part, and it never ends, and it is so tiring. And I just can't explain enough over some of the things that this idea of building belief is like never ending of a mission in your head. And then the third thing is know what must change and what must endure. Most people are really in a hurry to change everything. And I don't mean endure means you don't modernize it. But I've made big mistakes. when I didn't think about what should endure. And I didn't work on how work got done versus what work got done. A super big lesson, which we can come back to, super, especially in this day and age. People are like, oh, I built this, I made this, I did this. But back to that guy and those people working at him, you know, how they work has got like so much more to do with what comes out the other end. And then the last two are going to sound asynchronous. They're like, and I wrote this way before ChatGPT, it was you need to steward good tech. Put bluntly, you need to manage the upsides and the downsides of technology at the same time. We do not do that. And the fifth one is be resilient. Because I guarantee if you go work on something hard, let me tell you what, there is no straight line to heaven. And the critics are at every bend and all over you. I had a lifetime of them. And that ability, and I have a kind of like, what did I learn about a way to handle it? And there's two kind of aspects that I talk about. So those are the principles. Be in service of, build belief, know what must change and endure, steward good tech. Everybody's a tech company. And then power yourself with resilience.
I want to zoom in
Maybe
on
that's boring. Is that boring?
No. Wait.
Do you guys think that's boring? A little bit? The first three rows are very attentive. The rest are uncertain. Okay.
No, I think obviously the social scientist who wanted to be a professor is going to love these ideas,
I know.
right?
You and I like principles, right? And then that's why then the rest is all stories to try to make it come alive.
Yeah, but no, I want to zoom in on a few of those principles and how you practice them. So I love the one about focusing on what's going to endure, not just what's going to change. And right around when you were writing the book, actually, Don van Nippenburg, right across the street, was publishing some research showing that people are more willing to go along with change if you tell them what will stay the same. Yeah. Like, hey, look, our vision and our strategy might evolve.
I wish I'd read that research.
Well, I could have sent it to you. But, okay. But I think the message is so often missed of here's the new vision, here's the new strategy, but here's our DNA that's going to stick. Here are the values and principles that are not going to change. So can you give us some examples of how you did that?
Yeah, you should have wrote my chapter maybe shorter than I did, okay? Because, you know, go back and picture you would with me in 2012 when I took over. Look, IBM had done great in its past, but now it walked into an era, and it would be my era, the moment I would be blessed, but it would be a moment when there was cloud, there was social, there was mobile, there was data, all at once. Usually tech's got one big thing happening, and it can go a decade. No. All at once. And we were really taking the benefit of a past model and not prepared for a future model. So that is my moment to start in that. And therefore, the pressure of become something else is so high. I can remember like the very first, we're going to talk about whether or not, I mean, people are like, don't do an interview with media, don't do anything. And the very first cover comes out on me, it says, will IBM ever be cool again? And so, welcome. And so that idea, and the pressure is so intense to be all these other things. I would come to call it chasing shiny objects. And so what would be an example of that, to Adam's point, this idea of know what you are at your core, and particularly when you have to change, that idea that people can hang on to something they know while the winds will whip, you know? And I learned it because we would go start. And I mean, yes, of course, we were doing data, AI, cloud, but I'll just pick cloud. We said practical example. All right, Amazon and Microsoft had a decade on us already. And so here we go running off, and of course, everyone's like, well, you got to be just like a consumer cloud. Okay, you're running off, and tons of money and trying to go there until, I mean, we're 10 years behind on that. And you realize that, wait a second, what are we? You know, we are an enterprise company. I'm not a consumer-facing company. I no longer even had consumer products. And so to realize, no, what are we? And it would take us down the path to understand, not that you have to understand cloud or technology, we were a hybrid cloud. We understood big companies. We knew the journey they would take. No, we were not that consumer cloud. We were this. That is what we were, and to be comfortable in that. Or, you know, the advent of Facebook, everything, big marketing projects, a story that I'll always remember him. If you ever, you wouldn't have, he's passed away, but Arnie Sorensen ran Marriott. Arnie and I kind of grew up from as being tykes through our companies, and he becomes CEO, and we're bidding on a marketing project there. Okay, so because we'd assembled all this, hey, marketing was really big. Everybody was changing marketing. And I call him Arnie, and I'm like, I've always taken very good care. I was very customer focused. I was like, all the reasons why I should win this marketing. He's like, Ginni, just be the best IBM you can be. And I was like, he's like, why do you care about marketing? Like, you run my loyalty systems, my property management systems, the most important things I do. Why do you care? Okay, I would go off to sell all that stuff after. I mean, not just one conversation, okay? But I was like, it will always stick with me. It's so visceral to me. I can feel it in this moment. And I was like, yeah, I got to get them back to their roots, you know, and all this other stuff becomes a distraction. And yes, we had to do big things to change, but it's like these were ornaments hanging on a tree. They weren't the tree. And that to me is what I'm trying to convey in Change and Endure. Along with, I would then learn this lesson of, you know, speed, man. The whole world was moving fast. And look, there's a lot of tech companies who are now going to begin chapter 2. Like, I was in chapter 10 of us. And speed, consumerism, easy to use. You know, like our stuff was not easy to use because we were like, hey, we can take care of all 8 million scenarios here. And let me unveil that all to you at one time when you open this up. And that's what engineers do. And I was so focused on speed. I'd be like telling everyone, come on, guys, we got to go faster. We got to go faster. We got to change. Come on. I mean, people are like, oh, our middle name is, you know, speed. And I would be like, okay, I'm saying go faster. It's not going faster. I was maybe a couple years in, I'm like, okay, I was like very apologetic. I was like, I had this epiphany. I was like, okay, why is it not going faster? And it would become really clear to me. And I was a big company, 500,000 people, right? So I'm like, if I don't do something to change how work gets done, and that's what leadership determines. I'm like, they're not saying, oh, let's be slow. Please, let's be slow. Back to your guy writing that stuff. No way. The teams know they want to go faster, but who puts these processes in place about how stuff gets done or what they have to check or no clear decisions or da-da-da? I felt so bad, and I apologized to the workforce. I was like, man, I realized, like, this is leadership's job to get stuff out of your way, all right? And that means new tools, that means new ways of working, that means design thinking, agile, that means small teams, that means, like, this is our job, not yours. And that, to me, I hope one day you always remember that lesson about how work got done. That would take me down a whole big old journey of agile, design thinking, net promoter scores, focus on skills. That would end up being probably my most enduring legacy of what I would leave behind was a foundation that could weather change.
That goes to your point about building belief. So I can only imagine being in your shoes at IBM saying to a bunch of techies and engineers, we're going to do design thinking.
No.
How did you get people excited about that?
Yeah, that was a problem. Because, you know, look, again, but well-intended, because people really believed in their products. And if you do mission critical work, you really do care if stuff doesn't break and as secure as could be. And so you start building from the inside. I was talking to Laura earlier, and you move outward from there because you get this very complex thing right, and you move out, and the last person to touch your product is the consumer who's buying it, okay? So, because you build outward, that's like how engineers think. And so this was a world where, you got to start on the outside and come in. And that's kind of how I would describe it, simply put. Those now, many people, but nobody did design on that scale. And I remember we hired a fella, and I said to him, I just happened to see him the other day, by the way, at South by Southwest. He's one of the foremost design thinkers in the enterprise setting now. And but I said to him, we'd hired him, I was like, okay, I believe this thing about design thinking, and that, you know, all these, it doesn't matter if we get all this great stuff out if nobody can ever use it or want it, you know, so we've got to get this in. And I said, what do you think we need to get started? Because if you think you're going to be able to do this with like a couple hundred people, you're nuts. I said, well, what do you think I need? He said, I think I need like 1,000 or 2,000 to start. And I am positive he told me no. Like, I mean, I was going to tell him no. I said, okay, go ahead. And of course, then I told his boss, hey, you find out how to cover it, you know. So, and to that guy's credit, he did. And that started in what would then be a journey. We brought these, you say, how do we get it? Oh my God, we did these pilgrimages, started with teams of multidisciplinary 5 and 10 at a time to this kind of a religious experience about design thinking. But it would take a year. He thought it would take more, but in a year we got to 2,000. And then in 2 and 3 years, we were at 10 and 20,000, and soon we trained 100,000. And every team, you know, but it was like brick at a time of teaching. And they'd have to go in, they'd get homework, they'd have to come back. It is like hard work to do change. I think that was the part I was trying to convey. Like, it's science to get people to embrace and change and believe. But then they started to see it, and they saw customer reactions, and that's how you do it. I don't know. Does anybody else in here think about like how you do your work, not just what you do? A few people? Or is that a foreign concept, or do you ever think of it, or do you just think products hop out of a bag or something? I don't know.
I've honestly never given much thought to where products come from.
No.
In the first place.
No. I mean, but leadership, about this idea that it's our jobs to kind of, I don't want to say like you're demanding a process and follow it. That's not it. It's like you're trying to figuring out how does the work have to change so people can use their own brains and get stuff done, you know?
No, I think that's exactly right. A few years ago, Rob Cross and I made a call for a chief collaboration officer role in companies because we looked at all these organizations that only succeed if people are able to become more than the sum of their parts, and seeing how many organizations were less than the sum of their parts. Yeah. And the question was, who's managing the relationships, the communication, the silo busting between people? And the answer is no one. Yeah. No one is managing it. Yeah. HR is not in charge of it, not even close. Often the CIO could see it, right, in like email data and meetings, but didn't have any power over it. And usually the CEO is too busy on strategy, right, to think about this kind of question. So I think you're onto something.
I would learn at the end of the day. I felt like if I'd not done that, that's why I kind of end the book in a personal letter, and I say, always remember that how you do your work just might be remembered more than what you do. And if I really felt it wasn't fair to people otherwise. So anyways, that was one of my learnings, at least.
Yeah, I like it. So that actually is, I think, a good segue to the future of work, because we have a lot of people who are understandably anxious about how we're all going to do work and whether we're going to have work in the future. So first question is, long before anyone knew what ChatGPT was, you had Project Debater, you had Watson, you had all kinds of AI, and we're not letting the public see most of what you were doing, so we didn't know how scared we should be. How terrified are you? On a scale from frightened to panicked.
Actually, I am not frightened of the technology. I am more frightened if we will learn from the past and if we can build trust in the technology. So this is, I'm really trying a lot, good timing with the book. Again, I didn't know chat was going to come out, and so this is like great timing, and especially as you guys think about this. Some of this you wouldn't even know, but Adam's referencing Watson back in, kind of the very first. I mean, AI has been around decades. Those of you, anybody tech guys in the room? Okay. You and me, two of us. I can say anything then. Is that, no. AI has been in and out of its winters for decades, right? You would know this too, of it's going to be, not going to be, it'll be here, yes, this is it, this is the moment, this is it. And I thought too, by the way, in 2012-13, this was the moment. But I really learned some hard lessons that we're going to learn again. And this is why I'm so focused on this idea of managing the upside and downside of technology at once. Like, our job is to usher it safely into the world, not just build it. And those of us build it, bigger responsibility, but everybody uses it now, right? Like, I'm on some big bank boards and all, and I'm like, okay, you're in a hurry to put it out there. Okay, trust is your premium. What is it like that we're going to do to make sure people understand how they use this stuff? So I learned something so to me, this moment in time, the question is not the technology, the question is around people and trust, is how I feel so strongly. And what I learned when Watson was, and is still IBM's AI technology, but we chose to try it in one of the most difficult areas first. That back to DNA, good or bad, probably, we always go for the hard problem, not always good, okay? But we always did, and we went over oncology and medical first. And I write about my big lesson learning here. Because what I learned was this wasn't an issue that the technology wasn't really ready. Because, by the way, doctors make mistakes. It could be 5, 20, 30% of the time. Your tolerance for technology in a really important area like healthcare is way different. You expect zero problem. And even though you try to say, hey, your doc's wrong 30%, this is only wrong 10%, you're like, yeah, really? No way. And so I also learned doctors, the country is fee for service, doesn't pay for outcomes, so there's nothing in the system that would embrace you to want to change how you worked. And then a doctor works round the clock. He's like, okay, this is like one more thing I have to add to my work is technology. And then it's in a different skill. Like when am I supposed to learn this between 2 and 3 a.m.? And so I would start to see all these issues that had nothing to do with technology. And then how it's trained is what you're seeing in chat very well in this kind of AI, because there's a wide range of AI. It's trained by humanity. It's good and it's bad, right? And then who owns the data? It should benefit. There's all those issues. In like social media, we took all the upside till we realized there was downside, right? And I feel like with chat, these downsides are very evident right now. So great, let's work on the positive and let's please work on the negative at the same time. Like I think for your guys' business, education, okay, I have an answer, but I'm kind of curious of yours first. How do you think technology like chat and generative AI will change education? And what do you fear and what do you hope?
That's a dangerous question, Ginny. There's an old joke that we shouldn't try to predict the future because historians aren't even very accurate in predicting the past.
True.
So I say this with a lot of trepidation, but I think one of the things we've already seen is 2 randomized controlled experiments showing that if we give knowledge workers chat or a similar tool, they actually not only are more productive in writing, they're also producing higher quality writing. And this was a big shock for me, but it turns out what it allowed a lot of them to do was to overcome writer's block and spend less time on the rough drafting and more time on what humans do really well, which is idea generation and editing and revising. And so I think you can immediately see, the number of term papers I would have finished earlier if these tools had existed when I was in college is sad to think about. Really sad to think about. But then I would have wasted just as much time rewriting them because I hate every word that these tools spit out. It's terrible, really bad. And I guess I'm a writing snob in that way. But I have yet to see a decent sentence.
So could you decide when you're teaching, how you would change how you teach because of it?
I haven't had to yet.
No, but when you come back
yeah, I think, for sure, we can't give essays as take-home assignments anymore. I think they're going to have to be done on site as tests, which to me defeats the whole purpose of writing, which is a great writer is not somebody who can, on command, produce Shakespeare, right? In 4 minutes, go, good luck.
Yeah.
Right? It's somebody who can actually master that craft and produce Shakespeare in a lifetime. And unfortunately, I don't think we have good workarounds for that. Can you solve that for me?
Well, I have a kind of an idea, and a little bit of a view, because I understand what you're saying. So my first reaction because the first big reaction to chat, a lot of it was around the education, right? Everybody can cheat and get this done. And I did, my first reaction is going to sound so simple because I thought, God, I wish at the very same moment they would have released something that said, hey, run this and it can give you the level of confidence that was created with chat. Just to show that hey, person, there is downside here. It would have just been symbolic as something. Now, there are a lot of people building that stuff and coming out, but it would have just in the moment, how it's introduced is going to matter, right? Then I thought to myself, but you know what? The positive would be take what chat gives you. Instead of when I went to school, you had to memorize a lot of stuff and come back with it. Well, maybe now it's really going to go back to teaching critical thinking. You're going to take something and your job is going to be pull it apart, find the argument in it. Is it right? Is it wrong? How would you improve it? Just like you were saying, I hate what is written, And so maybe, my positive side says, okay, does this mean now we're going to move from an era of education of facts to critical thinking? In their time in history, it was a lot of critical thinking. So maybe that's a good thing that can come out, but we got to manage that process to have it happen that way, right? And I super worry about other governments, or not the governments, but other bad actors around the world feeding this thing with non-factual data to get it to go do bad things. That's happening as we speak, big time. So I really hope as much airtime would be dedicated to not a search war, right? But to, okay, this thing can do really great things. I thought AI in medicine could do really great things, but I watched Henry Kissinger wrote it's a complex article, but and it says, history teaches us that what he says, but if humanity doesn't understand something, they fear it or they revolt. And I think we have that moment. I don't think it's overstating it really that much with AI now, because I think it could help I agree, Copilot, or as some say, chat could be the new language of programming is English. Just say English and it'll write the code, tell it what to do. I think there's truth in all that. So it could be a great co-pilot, as some people have called that, but we had better do something to actively, I worked on AI ethics, guys, for a decade, and nobody would listen to me on AI ethics. I'm so sad about my non-persuasive capabilities. And, maybe now, though, is the moment. That, and by the way, Europe's kind of ahead on this topic, just like they were on GDPR, on data privacy.
Yeah, why do you think you've had trouble getting through?
I think there was no, I think understanding technology. B, I think part of who you're talking to write AI ethics to is governments who don't understand. So you could do a lot of education. And it's a bit, when you say ethics, you're just like, wait, look, we have to make these technologies explainable. I think they're super hard to control. So I've tried to control technologies. Like when I'm like, oh my God, that one is like ahead of us, slow it down. Impossible. What I have learned, though, is maybe what you should regulate is how it's used. Not it itself, but how it's used, right? And that would be like a value I would learn even in the company, that a lot of these technologies, other companies, people would protest. I don't want these used in military. No. Our view was if it was used in defense, it was okay. I wasn't going to make killing machines, but if it was used in defense, so the use, like if you had your phone on you, you would probably like use your face to open it. Maybe you do, maybe you don't trust it. You don't.
Definitely
That's
don't.
So interesting. Is it because you don't trust them to have your face?
Yeah, I feel like my face is already in enough places.
Is that what? Okay, well, all right. I don't feel that way. So I'm like, so much easier, right? But I don't think it should be used for racial profiling, right? So I'm like regulating the use already in my head of how this should happen. So why has it not been successful to date, all these attempts? I think like what I learned, everything's got its moment. You know what I mean? Like I thought AI's moment would have been a decade ago. Well, now it's here. So now I think we'll come to terms with it, and that we should learn from all these other technologies.
That's interesting. I also think we have a framing problem, which is I think when you call it AI ethics, you've already lost.
Yeah, very good
Because
point.
everybody thinks they're ethical right, by their own moral compass.
Fair enough.
I think I would be much more persuaded if somebody brought to me AI safety.
Yeah. Excellent point. Can I revise my second version of the book?
Your publisher will make that decision.
I think that's a very, very good point, because it's more of like, I call them principles of trust and transparency, was what I actually call it in the book, yeah.
I could get behind those. Okay, so give us your forecast. You made me make a prediction. Now I'm going to ask you for one. In what year are robots going to take many of our jobs?
I think not in the foreseeable future. I really, look, every new technology comes along, it replaces some jobs. I think more likely than not, you'll be working with some kind of technology. Honestly, that's what I watched, I haven't watched in France, this is again back a number of years, bank employees. Look, I feel bad for these guys. You've ever seen how many financial products are in a bank? Every one of us wants to do a good job at what we do. The fact that you should know every one of them and know the financial regulatory details, impossible. And so if you had that, and I watched, we introduced it to help them answer questions, even the union votes for it. Because people want to do a good job in their hearts. And so I'm more in that lane.
And I think this is one of the early lessons of your chess triumphs,
Yep,
right? That
definitely.
A human plus a computer could beat a computer.
Yeah, I still believe that's where this heads, if we manage the downside.
Exciting. Okay, so this also goes to the work you're doing on skills,
Yes.
which I know you're keen to
thank
talk
you for
about.
letting me. And you're flashing your number sign of like, okay, we're out of time. So can I
talk to us about skills?
I know, here I am very cognizant I am in Wharton, one of the most esteemed or, educational places in the world. Excuse me. Well, fair enough.
Want to get invited back, Ginni?
I am vice chair at Northwestern, so I have a little bit of a problem. So
it's all right.
I get killed on one end to the other here.
We can live with asymmetric rivalry.
Yes.
Keep going.
Okay. So this, guys, okay, thank you for letting, I said to,
we still have time. Keep going.
I said, in your lives, this I really believe matters, and I did mean it when I said it's a point of, to preserve democracy. Again, I learned from my mom and her experience. One point I didn't mention then was access and aptitude, two different things. My mom had aptitude. She had no access. Okay, that will be forever in my brain. Time will go on. I had no access as a kid. I would, by the thanks of neighbors and communities and teachers, end up at a place like Northwestern. I couldn't afford to be there. It was by the grace of God of a scholarship in a school that would said, if you can get in academically, we'll find you the money somehow, because I had no money. So time will go on. I then become CEO. Just wasn't like the next thing, but many decades will go by, and which we could talk about all those learnings. But it's 2012. I'm trying to hire cyber people, and unemployment in this country is 10%, and we can't find people. I said, this is odd. Okay, what's that mean? Skill mismatch in the education system. So I go to a next meeting. Honest to God, that's how it happens. I go to the next meeting. It's corporate social responsibility, and they're like, hey, we got this one little school in Brooklyn, and it's a very poor neighborhood, Jen. And the community college, we're giving them a curriculum. They get an internship, and we got a few jobs they could get in line for. We'll give them first stab at a few jobs. If they come through, they can get an associate degree, no cost while they're in high school. 6-year high school, think of it. I said, oh, interesting. We'll hire some people. Works out. Next year I come back, I say, okay, how many did we hire? They're like, well, like 8. I'm like, 8? They're doing so good. Well, 95% of our jobs require a PhD or a college degree. I say, that's interesting. Yet these guys are doing super, super good. Okay, this would be, I'll fast forward you to the journey of my 10, 15 years on this, in that I say, let's start looking. First, I think, I look more at the kids. And they were kids at this point still, really. And we know now, because the company thinks, wait, my workforce is like, if you let a lot of people like this in, you're going to dumb down this whole workforce. I said, we better start studying this. We prove after 1 year, same results as my team with degrees. And then we find, more loyal, more retentive, and they're taking more follow-on education. Oh, by the way, 75% have now gone on to get degrees. And oh, by the way, we have our first PhD. And 95% are Black and Hispanic. I said, this is so interesting. I feel like I have discovered a new talent pool in this country when there are not enough people in these jobs. And it would take me down a decade journey of asking, and thank God I had a team that believed it then, and check every job and say, let's rewrite our jobs for the skill, not the degree. America's become lazy. Check, degree. And what we would find, and I have like a big enough sample, not as good of the way you do your work of every, I can't say I am statistically correct from every angle. I've now worked with 100 of the biggest companies in the country. And of all good jobs, I would tell you 50% are over-credentialed. That you don't need a college degree to start if you wrote it for skill. And it's like a strong belief that where you start should not determine where you end. And I believe it so deeply. I've worked on this now so long, and there would be another moment in time that would happen, which would be George Floyd's murder. And my colleagues, everybody wanted to do something. And two of my very good friends, Ken Chenault, who ran American Express, Ken Frazier, who ran Merck, not too far, right? Two of the most senior, Black leaders in this country said, no, we should do what we do best is jobs. So they had this vision. And I was like, I call him one day, I go, okay, you got the vision, I got the how. Skills first. Because 80% of Blacks do not have a college degree. I mean, we will never, you're going to wait for college degrees. And by the way, you'll be shocked, 65% of Americans don't have a college degree. So forget about this American dream. And so it took, and in that moment, we're able to catalyze the whole big business community, right? And everybody's going through that process. And Delta Airlines, Ed removed it from pilots. Now, this does not mean you're going to have a pilot that doesn't know how to fly. He got it a different way. And they got 1,000 applications. They removes that requirement. And it changes HR. It's a thing that instead of just buying talent, you got to build it. By the way, I would come to learn, this is good for everybody in the whole company. Like, who doesn't want to be paid for skill and promoted for skill? And, their whole life.
The people in this room.
I hope you do too, right?
The people who won the pedigree lottery.
Yeah, well, they did. I learned the definition of privilege writing a book. And so I have come so full circle. Thank you for letting me. I sound like I'm giving a speech, or like I'm so convinced that if more people don't feel they have a better future in our country, and this is my biggest thing I worry about, they're like, let's look for an alternative to democracy because this is not producing the right outcome for all of us. Or the financial debt for college for everyone, and the fact that if you're in tech like me and the other guy up here, there's the two of us, your skills have to change every 3 to 5 years. And this is going to be a lifelong learning problem, right? So people got to be able to go back to school, and there's policy changes that are easy. Not easy. Nothing in government's easy. But I've witnessed perseverance. You can make these changes. So I'm really, this is my movement. I use it as an illustrative point of how you can get your power to go from yourself to your team to the world. And sometimes you don't even realize it, you can do it, and you can. And so I think this is now turning into a movement for the country. And by the way, those schools I told you about, I've become a mission on this around the world. There are now 300 of them around the world in 30 countries. And New York's going to do another 60, I think. Texas is going. They eventually want to get them all this way. I just was in D.C. with a bunch of governors, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Education. I think this is going to happen in this country, that it's going to be a full onslaught. Does not mean college is bad, okay? You just may start a little later. No, please don't. Like I was
Two people walked out.
It's kind of good. I am by Sheridan University. But it's not the only route. And it's like everybody has a different entry point onto the highway, and that's all. Some entryways are later in life, and I'm so passionate about it. I will stop. Okay, that's all.
No, let me just say three things in reaction. Number one, this is what it means to serve, the way you're describing it, right? Like we're seeing you describe that and model it beautifully. Secondly, don't ever apologize for doing important work.
Yeah.
This may be the most important work of your life. So
be.
thank you, and I think that deserves a round of applause, by the way.
All right.
And third, you're reminding me of one of our alums, Peter Blair, who studied what it means to be skilled through alternative routes and showed exactly what you're describing using econometric tools, that requiring college degrees and advanced degrees systematically discriminates against people who have learned through vocational training, through internships and apprenticeships and returnships, through community college, and who have learned on the job. And systematically, that closes doors on people who have not been lucky to be born into opportunity or privilege. And we are long overdue to change that. So I'm so grateful that you're doing this work.
Thank you for getting the message out. So you know what, in the book when I do it, yes, I hope you join the movement and think of it, right, like you say. But I also am trying to say to people, hey, your passion may be different than mine, okay? But I just really don't want you to give up on it, because you might look at the world and go, oh, the political system's intractable, nothing can get done. And I have just found, okay, yeah, it's hard, but it is all changeable. So I'm an optimist. I know that's, maybe people aren't, but I am an optimist about, how to get this. And I found that around the world, jobs are the greatest currency. So as you all go into, there isn't a leader of a country I couldn't see. It's something I couldn't. If I could talk jobs, this is what everyone wants for their country. It's what you want for your children. It's what, it's an interesting way to look at life that way. So, you teach a crowd, right, to be ready for this.
I feel like you're validating my career choice.
Yes.
Jobs are the most important thing. I should have been an organizational psychologist. Oh, wait.
I do think teachers are highly underrated and underappreciated. We give them one of our most important assets, our children, and, I think that is another part of the book that I talk about, because they're an important part of this equation.
Agreed. Okay, I want to make sure. Yes, we have a lightning round. I'm impressed that you knew that. We also have a few audience.
Chapter on preparation, and you'll know why.
You have done a lot of homework for this, Ginni. A lot.
It's a disease.
I'm glad, though, it's one that seems to be only positively contagious to other people. So, lightning round, and then we've got a few audience questions I want to make sure we get to. I've covered a bunch of them already. Okay, lightning-wise, tell me the worst career advice you've ever gotten.
Well, I got lots. Probably the worst one was that when someone told me, just do a good job and the rest will happen. Yeah. You do have to advocate for yourself in the way you're comfortable doing that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What's something you've rethought in the last couple of years?
I'm trying. Okay, so I have to preface this. I am trying to spend all I believe on quality is the real answer to this question. More time with my family, my husband. Yeah. Someone once told me, you're far from retiring, you guys. They were writing a book that when people retire, the name of the book would be called, I don't know if they're ever writing it or not, 20 Summers. That you have about 20 summers left. And that if you did, what would you do with your life? And if you really thought of it that way. Now, you're far from that, most of you. But that thought, so what am I doing? It's like work on the things that are most important. So that's what I've rethought. As I was retiring, like what my bullseye, I got the pleasure to work with Lou Gerstner. You may know him if you've ever read the histories of IBM or great leaders in this country, and he is one of the greatest. He's remained my friend to this day. He's in his 80s. And as I was going to retire, he said, okay, now we have to, you have to come in for your counseling sessions on retirement. And I would come, he's like, tell me what you're thinking of doing. And I would tell him, like, well, this person suggested this, and private equity, and this, and that, and the other. He's like, oh, well, you get an F. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. He's like, I want you to go back again and think harder. After all the skills you've accumulated, like, think of a bullseye, and what is that center of that bullseye going to be? And then the next ring, you have to put your husband in. And he's like, well, he didn't mean like don't make him important.
Wait, what?
He was afraid he'd be in no ring, right? So he was like, put him in a ring. But he meant like, what is that? And so to rethink that set of priorities when your whole life has been one mission, for the most part, 40 years at IBM. So I have rethought that, both him and that's what led me to this focus on, like you said, maybe it will. I hope to God it is the most important legacy I leave behind, right? Is this other work.
I'm going to try to ask you questions that are easier to
Shorter?
answer,
Yeah,
lightning
sorry.
style.
Yeah,
no, that's
don't
my
give me
bad.
it's the kind you got to like
They're
think
too
hard.
meaty. Okay, leader you admire most outside of IBM?
Do you know Shirley Jackson? She just stepped down as a leader, of RPI, but she was the first black woman to ever get a PhD out of MIT. She is a force of nature.
Yep. What's a book you think everyone in the room should read that you did not author? Nor did I.
Okay, now both of you? I felt one of the books Pope Francis wrote was a very good book. So that something different, That the point is to see the view from an entirely different perspective of what is leadership, right?
Okay, and finally, in a sentence on the lightning round, I know there are some students in the audience who are going to benefit from what you're about to say. What is the most important reason that they should not go to banking or consulting but do tech instead?
No, seriously. It teaches you how to problem solve. And no matter what you do in life, you will have a problem. And if you do something meaningful, it'll be a problem to solve. I wish I could get more people to go into tech and engineering for that reason. I felt that's what it taught me to do, was problem solve. And that would apply to any career. It's really an issue again, I'm only going on only because you allowed me a little more time there, but the point that so many like young women who don't want to go into engineering or feel a stereotype about it, I'm like, look, you don't have to think of yourself as a practicing electrical engineer or something like that. It is about, you will be never frightened of a problem because you learn how to break it down. And by the way, like the biggest problems in the world, I say, it requires systems thinking to solve them because they're so interrelated, like all these things that are influencing something else, and you need to be able to like step back and understand that. That's what engineers do, right? They break big complex things into digestible things.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, speaking of women, there are some questions about diversity here that I think are really important, so I want to maybe tie two of them together. First one is, you broke one of the most durable glass ceilings on Earth. What's your most important advice on how you did that? And then secondly, related to that, what did you learn from your battle at Augusta National?
Oh, well, the first one is we were doing our interview earlier. I was talking about this idea that growth and comfort never coexist, right? That idea, to me, as a woman, and I don't know why I can't put my finger on this, right? But there's studies done, you probably can tell them to me, of every time there's an opportunity, women will give you the 5 reasons they can't do something, and a man might give you the 5 reasons he can do something. And that would finally come to roost with me, right? When I would get offered a job and tell my boss, like I said, have to go back and talk to my husband about it, a big job, and my husband said to me, do you think a man would answer the question that way? That I had to go back and talk to my husband. And he was right, and it wasn't just making a gender point, but this point that the biggest thing I could leave you with is that thought of embrace discomfort because it means you're learning something. So I would be like hungry to get on more and more complex and difficult projects. It would become a sign of like, yes, the more nervous I get, that's so good because at the other end, something good comes out of it. And so it's what led me to all my preparation in life. It's all because I'm like, God, if it's something I didn't know and now I know something, I'm better each time. And so I would go from being afraid of change to looking for change. And that when I wasn't nervous, I'd be starting to get, this is not good. This means I'm learning nothing. And it would be time to change. And that would be my biggest, around the world, I would talk to women about this. In fact, people thought I should have named the book that. Growth and comfort will never coexist. And that would be my biggest piece of advice.
That is some twisted Pavlovian conditioning right
That
there.
is
Like, I'm gonna wire myself so that I only feel good when I feel bad.
Yes, it is true. But I don't know. You think about, when have you ever learned the most? How did you feel?
Usually uncomfortable.
I know, it sounds basic when I ask it that way, right? You're like, yeah, it's probably true, right? I was at risk. Something happened. And so if you can do that, you will be surprised what you will go where it'll take you.
Mm-hmm. And then Augusta?
Oh, well, I learned that it has nothing to do with my golf skills. That is one thing I say to everyone. I've got the worst ROI. Any golfers in the room, I mean, no, see, isn't that interesting, right? So it is a skill I first started with my husband, who loves it. And I started many, many years ago. And I always say, though, for the amount of effort, it is the poorest. My abilities are not matched by my effort by any stretch. So, but.
Touche. All right. And then there's another question here about you spent your whole career in one company.
Yeah.
That is not the norm anymore. Do you think there's still a case to be made for that kind of loyalty? Or if you were in all of our students' shoes, would you do something different?
When you guys run something, I think the case is, I would say to people, hey, I have to earn your decision to stay here every time as a company. And I stayed in one place because I pivoted so many times after I could get used to that discomfort thing, okay? I felt I did work 12 places. I went from being an engineer. I then was into marketing. I then built a consulting group. I then worked in software. I mean, I had all these careers, but I had the benefit of the same network around me, right? So I felt I could do that. So I would say to people, yeah, there's benefit, but the company has to earn your desire to stay there. And the other thing I would say is, some of you look at what your next step is. Every time, even when I ever thought of leaving, I always ask myself the question, am I running from something or am I running to something? And so many times the answer is you're running from something. That can be fixed. It might be time, it could be a situation. And I just feel it's like the most important thing to ever ask yourself. Are you running to something? And so when you think about where you'll work, you'll answer those questions. And it'll have to be something aligned. Like, I always wanted to do something that would do something important and have meaning and impact something. It doesn't mean it had to be a big company. For me, it was technology to do that, because I did go work at General Motors for a while after because I felt so loyal after they helped me pay my education. It was such a big number. And I say to Mary, who's my friend now, so Mary, like, I tried, but I learned at a really tender age there was a difference between a career and a job. This was a job to me because I wasn't in love with cars. I was working on buses, by the way, and I was like, "This is." I mean, not driving. I was having to build the engines. I'm like, "Oh," and so I learned that. And so that idea that you get to do something at some point that you are really got some strong passion about is so important. That's why you'll stay one place. I had passion that technology could it make your and my life better. I didn't get to work on that every minute, by the way. That's not how life is. That's unrealistic. But I did a lot of the time.
Well, your passion is palpable. I think it's safe to say we would all be lucky to work with someone as passionate as you are.
Well,
can't thank you enough for coming to join us today.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
And scene. Thank you, Ginni.
That's it. Cut. Thank you, guys.